It's a pleasure to introduce Denis. He is probably one of the most charismatic and prolific contributor to this decision management movement. And Denis is a member of all standard committees from OMG and has all this experience. And I know Denis is a person who always thinks out of box. He always innovates, he always brings new teachers and new capabilities, and suddenly his title of his talk today is Thinking Inside the Box. So I will let him to explain this. Denis?
Thank you, Jacob. Hi, everyone. I'm Denis Gagne from Trisatech. Trisatech is an enterprise software vendor with a very complete and very powerful DMN implementation, both on the modeling and on the automation side. And today, as Jacob mentioned, I want you to start thinking inside the box. I'm always counter to the flow. So a little bit of context, DMN, the decision model annotation, I think is well known within this group. May not be as well known maybe from the outside world. DMN is a standard published by the Object Management Group, and it's currently in its version 1.3. I do encourage people to go and take a look at DMN. It is a very powerful way of thinking and looking at decision making in an organization. So about DMN, some of the most powerful elements about DMN are listed here, and I've talked a lot about many of those. Decision as a first-class citizen is always a big topic of mine. Visual representation of decision is a topic I'm going to address today. What you model is what you execute, I think was really coined by Bruce Silver the first time, but it's certainly a powerful statement too. And completely explainable decision automation is a topic that is dear to my heart, and even more in those days of black box AI, which I think are a little bit misleading. So today, before I get into the visual side of DMN, I wanted to press on that one point: what you model is what you execute. This is, to me, the most important benefits you get from DMN is the fact that the model is actually the decision requirement. The fact that the model is in fact a decision logic as well. The model is the decision documentation. The model is the decision code. The model is verifiable. And why is this so important? Because if you think of it for a moment, what that means is that you have a single artifact that captures all this. In traditional work and traditional development, we would have, what, 5, 6 different artifacts to capture all this? Now we do it in one single artifact. That means simpler governance, it means simpler maintenance, it means simpler reuse across the organization. So this is a very, very powerful statement that we tend to overlook or just nod our head to, but it is a very powerful organizational benefit. Now to the topic of today, I want to start with a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's certainly been known and said so many times. I don't know who said that. I have no point of reference and couldn't find one. Maybe somebody can Google it for me. And basically, the fact is with DMN, a lot of our decision and a lot of the logic of these decisions, no matter how complex they are, can be provided very clearly with the decision requirement diagram. And thanks to Alan for this innovation and something that the standard has picked up and pushed, I think this is, again, another very important element of DMN. But something that is a little less known or a little less acknowledged is that, in fact, DMN offers visual notations with an S. There are actually 2 notations to DMN. There's the business requirement visualization, and there's also a decision logic visualization that is supported with a notation. And maybe that's the fault of the RTF or the revision task force, because we only really did the work for the interchange of the DRDs, the decision requirement diagrams, and didn't yet push the interchange of the box expression for the decision logic, and we'll see, hopefully we'll address these later on. So as I mentioned, DMN has the decision requirement diagrams. A decision requirement diagram allows you to clearly show what information requirements are for the decision and how you go about doing this. I'm doing a little bit of a poke to the COVID-19 example. This is a COVID-19 age risk computation for a decision, and a little shout out to DMN 1.2 that now allows us to put markers on our DRDs to better explain what's going on into the visualization. So what is a boxed expression? Basically, a box expression is a single box like this with a tab above. So this is visually a box expression. You always have that tab that's above the box, where the tab provides you with the name of the decision or the logic, and the box provides you with the actual body that contains the decision logic. It's that simple. Now, the current specification of DMN offers for this list of box expression. So we have literal expression, decision table, context, relation, function, invocation, and list. And I'll go through them briefly just to introduce them. So a literal expression is basically a box expression where inside the box, what you would have is most likely a fill expression. Many people make the comment that in DMN, you can switch the lower level fill for another language. I'd like to have some good theoretical arguments with these people. I don't think it's all that feasible, but it is believed in the general market. But certainly in the literal expression, you can pull a fill expression there to have the logic executed. And then we have the decision table. And a lot of people consider that in DMN, we have box expression and we have decision table. In fact, a decision table is itself a box expression. It's a particular case of box expression. It still has the tab to pick up the name of the decision and provides you the logic in a visual way inside the box. Then next we have the context. A context, again, the tab with the box that provides you, and these names can be considered a little bit as local variables within your logic. But DMN has this trick that if you don't use the result box, these then become global to your logic. So there's a lot of power in using context, and that's something that I heavily promote to people, is to use context in building their logic. Then we have relations, which is simply a list of different elements that we want to interrelate with one another. We have function, which you would expect, and with the call out here, this is a field function, providing the parameters inside the box, and the function logic. We have invocation, again, the tab with the logic of the box, with the invoke function and the parameters listed there. And finally, we have the list, which is just basically a listing of items. But again, the list as a box expression has the tab and the structure under it. So today, Trizatec wants to introduce some new additions to this. We're not claiming that we're innovating greatly here. We're just bringing some more box expression for 3 more structured statements that we have within field that don't have a box expression. And to my fellow RTF member, I would argue that if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. So here we want to introduce box iterator, box conditional, and box filter. So on the iterators side, we have 3 types of different iterators that we're introducing here. The first one is the for statement, and I guess as you would expect, a very simple box expression where the name is at the tab and you have the structure of the for, in, and return for the structure. So this would be an example. Here's the same field expression here that you can read as a field expression, and here's the equivalent iterator box expression for it. I won't make some argument as to whether one is better than the other. I'll leave you to make your own judgment. What we're proposing is not to remove one or replace it by the other. What we're proposing is these are two alternative structure visualization of the same expression. Another iterator is the every in satisfy statement that's part of the field language. So again, very similar approach to the structure. And here, another example of a literal expression. Every var in DMN, BPMN, CMMN satisfies ends with MN for model and notation. And if you run it in an every iterator, you would get something that looks like this. And the boxed version of the iterator is nicely read top down, which makes it simple for business people to assimilate and what's going on. Then there's the sum iterator. The sum look at all the different elements to make sure that to see if one or at least one of the elements meet the criteria there. So here we have, again, some word in DMN, BPMN, CMMN satisfies string length worth of 3, and the answer is true because DMN is that word. And here's the box expression version of that same field literal expression. So you get the sense, it's very visual. The box expression provide a very powerful visual way of simplifying the logic. So now another expression we want to introduce is the conditional box expression, where the conditional is the if then else statement of the field language. Here's an example of the literal version of that if then else statement. If client.age is greater than 18, then accepted, else refused. Visualize in a box conditional type of visualization gives you something like what we have here on the bottom right. And then we have filter box expression. So a first crack at this is to look at the different filter expression where out of an item, we want to make sure where the expression is true for the filter. So the first filter type that we have in DMN is items where. So basically a literal where out of a list here, I'm looking for items that are greater than 5. Again, the boxed version of it gives you a top-down view that you can read as you would expect in a funnel. So out of these items, which one are greater than 5? And that's what I get. I get 7 and 11 here as an answer. Another filter structure that are available from field is out of a series of items to select from these items. So for example, select from this list the third element. So here, the same thing, top-down view that looks a little bit like a funnel. So out of the list, I want the third element of that list. Another element that we're introducing, and I think Daniel from Eterna and Ulrich from Eterna will be happy to see that. So we're introducing the notions of annotation or commenting right into the box expression. So this is a first prototype. I think we're going to consider putting double lines here, as we have done in the decision table, to separate the logic from the annotation. So we may want to introduce a double line here as well. Right now, the Trizytec version doesn't, but that's a simple addition so that you can comment the box expression and make things more explicit, more understandable and usable, mostly for business people, because as we all know, us coders, we never comment anything. So I don't think we'll start with the box expression. But it is a good practice and certainly a feature that business people appreciate in using DMN. So let me get into some more example of this. So here's, for example, the Fibonacci sequence generator for the first 7 numbers written as a literal expression with commenting. Now we can start combining these box expression of iterator and conditional plus commenting, which gives you a very simple to read top-down structure of the logic. Some people may think that this is more easy to read for business people. Other will argue this is better. I'm not arguing one way or the other, but there is benefit in both ways of doing it. Now, a point that is, actually, I didn't know Alan was going to talk about this, but a point that Alan made about templating and structuring blueprinting using DRDs. So here is a DRD, actually 3 versions of the same DRD, which is basically different box logic. And here you can see by my marker here, if you picked it up quickly in my previous slide, here I have a literal version, I have a conditional version of it, and I have a box context version of it. So, but what's important here is that it is the same DRD, different box logic, but the same execution semantic. And again, the execution semantic is very important. As many people know, we have the DMN TCK, which is very busy at making sure that different implementation of DMN provides exactly the same execution semantic. And that's something that we need to hold dear to our heart, is that any DMN model should provide you the same execution semantic. You should get the same answer from any tool, anywhere. And we have to make sure that we protect this, and that's what the DMN TCK is there for. A little shout out here probably to our friend Gary and others that have realized that maybe we should start looking at range and list as a type of data input. Maybe we can bring this up in our conversation this year. So going on with this example, here's the my little COVID example. This is actually from evidence, from medical evidence that we have, that we've been using in different example. Here is the literal version of that logic. I think even a coder cannot read this. I was lucky that we have our code auto-completion and code coloring in there, because I would have made many mistakes in doing this. So that is certainly harder to follow. So here's the conditional version using the conditional box expression of it. I would argue this makes it a lot easier to read, and I could have put comments in there, but I was lazy. So I guess I didn't have enough time, I should have said. So here's the same box expression, but now using conditional, embedded conditional one into the other, which makes the logic a lot easier to read. And then because so many people are fan of decision table, here is a box context where I'm setting my invocation here, I'm invoking my age and year with these 2 parameters, and they taking this age and using it as a way to pick the score. Some people would argue this is a much simpler visualization of them. What's important is not which one you choose. What's important is that you can do all 3, and depending on the crowd and your audience, you may choose one over another to communicate your logic. Another example, and a shout out to my friend Gary here, 2015, we're going back, people. So in 2015, one of the challenge we had was the car group challenge, and Gary provided this very elegant solution that was really a good display of the power of DMN. But this is an amazing display of the power of DMN for coders, and more particularly coders that understand recursion and embedding on all different things here. And this solution is very efficient and elegant. Again, here's a different version using the new box expression that I would argue reading top down would give you a better sense of how Gary had structured his solution. This is still Gary's solution to the problem, but in a box expression that is more explicit with the different statement. You see iteration and conditional and everything mixed into there. So that was my presentation for today. Not too much. Hopefully you think this was so obvious that it wasn't worth a presentation. And if you think it was so obvious that it didn't work, it wasn't worth a presentation, then we did a great job, because that's the whole idea. We want these things to be simple and intuitive, so that we improve the usage of DMN to make it simple and intuitive for everybody. So in conclusion, introduce some new box expression there and annotation and commenting. And hopefully I have lots of time for questions and commenting.
Yes, absolutely. We have a number of questions and actually sort of discussion points going on the Slack group. There was a question early on from Bruce Silver asking how you would model not iterator, so not parentheses iterator parentheses.
Oh, you mean the negation? Yeah. So right now in the current structure, you would have to have a structure, a field expression to do that. Yeah. So it doesn't allow you to do everything in this current form.
Okay. There are actually a few other comments on the iterators as well. I think that's probably something that's of interest to a lot of people. It's Daniel commented that the iterators are easy to read, but also need quite a lot of space in a context, but probably easier to read for business users. Do you have any sort of comments or insights on that?
Yeah, and that is always, whenever you fall into visual modeling, that's always an issue, is the visual representation takes space. Certainly people that have built big BPMN model know that you can build really structured, but usually that's a way to invite decomposition into structured with sub-process. And DMN has the same power with the DRDs. You can decompose your logic into a more amicable and consumable piece. So yes, I would invite you to then decompose your logic using DRD in that box expression. And again, the example here that I put, and everybody can have access in the slide, someone could have argued that if I could have decomposed this into many sub-decision, one about the list of distinct group, one about the list of cars with group count, et cetera, which is possible. So DMN provides you all that expressiveness. It's your choice to cram it all in one box expression or to decompose it into a DRD. And then you follow methodology. Alan introduced 3 of them that are very popular now that brings you these way of decomposing your decisions.
Okay. Matteo has a question. He says, you know that he likes the new boxed expressions, but he feels that you might be missing a simple way to quickly distinguish an iterator from a context of the same entries, if then else, especially when they're nested.
Well, it could be, and that's something we're certainly willing to consider. Our experience as of now is that there is no, if you read this cascading top-down, it's quite easy to follow the logic, but there may be value to coloring and these elements, and we're quite amicable to, you know, any kind of improvement. And this is something that we intend to submit to the RTF, the revision task force for DMN 1.4. So hopefully we'll have lots of opportunities there to discuss this and execute that. The current version that I'm displaying today, we're right between DMN 1.3. So the way we've done it is in a way that extends DMN 1.3 and still is DMN 1.3 valid. But we're hoping to introduce these new box structure or box expression into DMN 1.4 so that it's usable generally and widely.
Matteo also made the comment that Feel does support code comments, so there's no excuse for writing Feel without having comments in it.
Yeah, I know. Just about every programming language has commenting. Nobody has excuses, but somehow.
Somehow we still make those excuses.
Yeah, somehow we have a reason. You know, the due date was very tight.
Yes. So Jan Purchase had a comment. He said about agreeing with a comment that Daniel had made about icons, color, or some other scheme should be used to differentiate the different box types. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah,
well, we're already, if you notice, at least at Trisatech, we're differentiating between the different root logic of every decision. So this doesn't tell you what's all inside the box, but it tells you that the root logic of this is a literal expression. And the root logic of this one is a conditional box expression. And the root logic of this one is a context box expression. So we're already using, and here you can see that these is a function. These BKMs are functions. So certainly at Trisatec, we've been using this for a while. We're augmenting this and differentiating more and more with the new version.
Okay. Gary Hallmark had a comment that adding an else if box could help flatten the deeply nested if then else boxed expressions.
Correct.
And also just he had a second comment. Sorry, I scrolled down, saw he had a second comment about adding a where box to the for loop would be nice too.
Yes. And I totally agree. And I hope you're going to submit this to the RTF so that we can bring those structured into field right now, which we don't have a specific statement into the field BNF. But as soon as we have that, yes, those are construct. So we wanted to stay for this particular exercise here. We wanted to stay within the realm of what we have in DMN 1.3 because we wanted this to be DMN 1.3 compliant. But in DMN 1.4, yes, bringing those two structured, those two statements would be a great addition to the field language.
Certainly lots of positive comments over on the Slack discussion. Just people are saying they're looking forward to using it with clients and that really great improvements and that things are very interesting. So I think you've definitely sparked a lot of interest here in people in sort of looking forward into these boxed expressions.
Thank you very much. And as the caveat, I didn't have a safe haven slide or any of this. So the caveat is that this is right now inside Trisatec wall, but we intend to make this available in the very, very short future. So if you have comment or recommendation based on what I presented today that we could apply before we make this public, we'd love to take on your suggestion.
Okay, now that sounds great. And I know that you'll be back tomorrow, and I meant to say this when Guillaume was finishing up as well. You'll both be back tomorrow on the Ask a Vendor panel. So definitely lots of opportunities to have a discussion about that as well as over on the Slack channel. Jacob, do you have any sort of comments or questions for Denis?
Just thank you, Denis. It's very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Appreciate the people from Europe that sticked around late. And thank you to the North Americans that are also on board. So have a great day, all.
Okay.